The modern world appears open and mapped, yet access is still tightly controlled. Beyond public borders lie places shaped by risk, power, and preservation. Some are restricted to protect humanity, others to protect secrets. We live in an age where the world is far more accessible than has ever been the case before. But still, there remains a number of places that, for various reasons, very few people are allowed to get close to. Whether for national security purposes, to prevent contamination, or simply for the safety of potential visitors, it's time to count down the 15 most secret places that you're not allowed to see. Number 15. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault opened in Sweden in 2008, and it's specifically designed to store and protect seed samples for future generations. It serves as a backup for the other 1,750 seed banks in the world and, in theory, can preserve each specimen for at least 1,000 years, no matter the effects of climate change or political attitudes. Each seed is kept in a 3-ply foil package at a constant temperature of -0.4 degrees Fahrenheit, and to make this as efficient as possible, the vault itself is in an extremely remote region of the island of Spitsbergen, which is in the Arctic Svalbard archipelago. Temperatures there rarely rise above freezing, and it's so difficult to reach that only authorized personnel have any way of getting there. The vault was designed to be able to store over 4 million samples in these conditions, and currently just a quarter of the capacity has been used up. Eventually, they hope to have seeds from every known plant species on Earth kept in storage there, and it may become an invaluable resource should those plants, for any reason, become extinct in the wild. The building essentially works the same way as a safety deposit vault in a bank, whereby the owners of the seeds are the organizations that send them to Svalbard to be stored. There have only been 2 instances so far when a withdrawal has actually happened, however, as the intent is normally for them to be kept there for at least several decades. With the importance of the preservation of everything held within, it isn't the type of place that you're allowed to enter. Only a very limited number of people have ever set side in that vault since it's opened, with it mostly being remotely operated and no permanent on-site staff. And each person who's been allowed in has had to pass an extensive security check, and can only enter while wearing the correct protective clothing to eliminate any chance of contamination. Number 14. Cayo Santiago. Cayo Santiago is an island off the coast of Puerto Rico. It's commonly referred to as Monkey Island, but don't be under the impression that it's full of cute little animals ready to play with you, because the reality of this place is a lot darker. The story began in 1938 when an American primatologist, Clarence Ray Carpenter, released 400 rhesus macaques. Rather than try to populate the island, he was the first of many to conduct experiments looking at their behavior in adverse situations. He realized that it would be much easier to breed a population close to home instead of chasing around for specimens in Africa, so his idea test site was born. For the following 80 years, the site was used to conduct tests that ranged from the harmless-like observation to the more sinister, such as disease research. Up until recently, there were almost 1,000 monkeys living on the island, and most of the time it seemed like they were observing the humans rather than the other way around. But you shouldn't get too close to them, because they're all natural carriers of a viral strain of herpes B, which is a form of the virus that can be deadly to humans. It's such a risk that the first thing any visitor to the island is told is to not let the monkey pee on you. As things stand now, the site is technically public property, so anyone can visit, but in reality, it's just official researchers who are able to visit the island, and tourists can only look at it from a distance. Number 13. Tomb of Qin Shi Huang. While digging a well in the Chinese town of Jiang in 1974, a farmer made one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in Chinese history. This hole suddenly opened up into a vast cavern, and inside were thousands upon thousands of statues that have since become known as the Terracotta Army. After extensive studies, it's been determined that they were crafted over 38 years, between 246 and 208 BC, as a fitting tribute for the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor. Each figure is modeled after an individual person, so no two look alike, and there are believed to be as many as 8,000 of them. As well as the human figures, there are 100 chariots, 400 horses, and more than 10,000 weapons, which represent the largest known project of its sort to have ever been built. Originally, they would have been painted with vivid colors, but these have now faded to become what we see today. But beyond the famous army is a much wider complex that's virtually an entire underground city and includes an imperial palace almost a quarter of the size of the Forbidden City in Beijing. While some of the statues have been removed and even taken around the world to display, only a select few have ever been allowed into the city itself in modern times because of the risk of causing irreparable damage to any of the treasures and secrets that it holds. This means that only a fraction of the discovery has so far been explored. Number 12. Poveglia. Most people think of Venice as being the most romantic city in the world, and with somewhere between 22 and 30 million visitors each year, space is definitely at a premium. There's an island in the lagoon, though, which no one is allowed to go to because of a serious health risk and because it's believed to be haunted. Poveglia was first inhabited in the year 421, but from 1776, it was used as a quarantine facility. Every ship that arrived in the area had to stop there first to be checked, and after several arrivals of crew infected with the bubonic plague, it became where infectious people were sent to either recover or die without passing it on to others. Following this, it was converted into a psychiatric hospital that became renowned for experimenting with new techniques, and the remains of some of these treatments can still be seen on the island to this day. The ghosts of those who were mistreated are said to still roam the beaches, and workers who sail too close return with paranormal stories. There are plans to completely redevelop the island, but for now, the crumbling buildings are a reminder of its cruel history and a warning to anyone who dares venture near its shores. It's relatively easy to access, though, which means that footage occasionally emerges of the rundown structures on the island. It is still classified as a health risk, however, so anyone doing so could end up regretting it. Number 11. Fort Meade. Named after a Union general from the United States Civil War, Fort Meade, which is in Maryland, is one of the most secretive places on American soil. It was first opened as Camp Admiral in 1917 as a military training ground. A signal training school as well as a tank school were opened there soon after. In the following decades, it became the place where new vehicle designs were tested, and as a prisoner of war camp during the Second World War II, it went on to become one of the crucial locations for radar equipment and various other technologies to provide air defense during the Cold War. Fort Meade is now not only home to several Army divisions, but also the headquarters of the NSA, the United States Cyber Command, and the Navy's Cryptologic Warfare Group 6. And it's seen as so secure that it also serves as a backup storage facility for the most valuable items owned by the Library of Congress. While it is fairly easy to find out which organizations are based there, and even which buildings they're located in, that's about as much as the information about Fort Meade that we get. Actually, what happens on the site, from the new technologies being developed to the new techniques being used to keep the nation safe, they are highly guarded secrets, and ones that the average citizens don't have a chance of getting close to. Number 10. Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. Exclusion Zone. Once a bustling town with more than 16,000 inhabitants, Chernobyl in northern Ukraine was the site of one of the world's worst ever nuclear incidents in 1986. On April 26 that year, the nearby nuclear power plant was conducting a systems test on its fourth reactor, but something went terribly wrong. There was a sudden surge of power, and the emergency shutdown was initiated. The further surge happened and triggered a series of explosions. The core of the reactor became exposed and caused a fire that sent a plume of highly radioactive smoke into the atmosphere. This plume drifted across large parts of the Soviet Union and across Europe, and turned Chernobyl into a wasteland. Today, there's a 19-mile or 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the reactor to prevent people from coming into contact with the dangerous parts that will take hundreds if not thousands of years to fully recover. It is one of the most radioactive areas in the world, and draws scientists and tourists from all over, although the time you can spend there is limited. The town was abandoned in such haste that you can still see shoes, cups, and toys where they were left in the panic, and the Chernobyl fairground, which was due to open a few days after the incident, lays in ruins, having never been used. There's one unexpected positive to the evacuation, though, and that's the effect it's had on the local wildlife. Species now roam free, and even rare birds have increased their numbers in the area. Tests are regularly carried out to see if the local fauna is being affected by the radiation, and while levels are present, it's not affecting animal populations. In fact, they're thriving, which just goes to prove a pretty stark reality. The presence of humans has a far more detrimental effect on animal habitats than even a nuclear disaster does. It's pretty eye-opening. Number 9. Porton Down. Porton Down is probably the most famous government facility in the UK, but even though its existence has been officially acknowledged, the projects that take place there remain the most secretive that the country is involved in. It was first opened in 1916 in response to the new chemical weapons being used by the Germans on the battlefields of the First World War, and soon started looking for ways to defend against them and to create new ones of their own. In the time since, the operations at Porton Down have been scaled up and down depending on how government policy and the threats being faced around the world, and it's now only home to classified military research labs, but it's also the country's health authority and several private companies are there too. What's known about the experiments that have taken place there is that between 1949 and 1989, as many as 20,000 people took part in various trials, and it was also the place where VX nerve gas was first developed in 1952. Also involved in the creation of CS gas and now where samples of some of the world's most dangerous pathogens such as Ebola, anthrax, and the plague are kept, you can wonder about what still takes place behind those secretive walls and why things are just being kept as secret as they always have been. Number 8. Heard Island, Australia. Despite falling under the jurisdiction of Australia, Heard Island is one of the most remote places on Earth. Lying around 2,547 miles or 4,099 kilometers to the southwest of Perth and about 2,600 miles or 4,200 kilometers to the southeast of South Africa and the Indian Ocean. It's Heard Island along with the surrounding McDonald Islands that you'll find Australia's only 2 active volcanoes, and one of them, Mawson Peak, is the tallest mountain in Australia, reaching an elevation of 9,006 feet or 2,745 meters. Because of where the islands are, they're also covered in 41 separate glaciers and are home to a wide range of different plant and animal species. Although they're volcanic in origin, they're made up of mainly limestone and scattered pieces of other rocks, and this means they're relatively fragile compared to most other islands, and this is why the Australian government forbids visitors from going there. There are some parts of the island that have never been seen by a person before, and the government wants to keep it that way in order to preserve it. Of course, this is a place that's so remote that there's virtually no chance that anyone would reach Heard Island without it being their specific destination, so with the rules in place, there have been fewer voyages to investigate the islands in the past half-century than have been sent to the moon. Number 7. The Siachen Glacier. There are some places in the world that militaries take far more interest in than you would expect, but perhaps the most mysterious of these is the Siachen Glacier. It's located within the eastern Karakoram mountain range and lies on the border between India and Pakistan, but despite being officially under Indian control, the two countries have fought over it since the 1970s. The 47-mile-long glacier ranges in elevation between 18,875 feet above sea level to about 11,875 feet and sees temperatures at certain times of the year plummet as low as -58 degrees Fahrenheit, or -50 degrees Celsius. These treacherous conditions haven't stopped it from being known as the highest battleground on Earth, and to enable their control over the glacier, it's believed that the Indian military has built a subglacial base to support the troops that patrol the surface. Just how vast this base isn't known, but there have been estimates that the Indian Army's presence produces as much as a ton of waste per day, which is being dumped on the glacier. It's also known that India has installed large networks of oil pipelines throughout the glacier to supply outposts and camps, as well as using chemical blasting to change the landscape to their needs, which is causing severe environmental consequences for the surrounding area. All of this activity, however, is causing the glacier to retreat at a far greater rate than ever before, so even if there's no official confirmation of the base, we'll probably all know for sure by 2035, at which time the glacier is only expected to be around a fifth of the size it was in 2011. Number 6. Niihau Island, United States. The westernmost and 7th largest island in the Hawaiian archipelago is known as Niihau, and it covers an area of 69.5 square miles, or about 180 square kilometers. It's 17.5 miles, or 28.2 kilometers, to the southwest of Kauai. Now, despite being a lush wetland region that's as beautiful as the rest of Hawaii, you won't find any resorts to stay in there, and the closest you'll get to it is a half-a-day helicopter tour to see the island from a distance. That's because of an unusual political agreement that means only people authorized by the island's owners are allowed to go there, and they're notoriously restrictive with who they welcome. The island was sold to Elizabeth Sinclair by the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1864 for $10,000, which is the equivalent to around 170 grand today, and it's her descendants, the Robinsons, who are still in charge. Only members of the family and their relatives, along with U.S. Navy personnel, government officials, and the occasional invited guest are allowed on the island, and this has allowed for the development of a community that's detached from the outside world. Now, this doesn't mean that they have nothing to do with anyone else, though, and they've had a long-standing relationship with the U.S. military, to the point where there's a small installation on the island, and it's also occasionally used as a site for specialist training operations. There are now believed to be around 170 residents on the island, and after building an economy that was mainly sustained by farming, they are all virtually self-sufficient. No rent has to be paid by residents, and meat is free to everyone that lives there. All electricity is provided by solar power, and there are no vehicles, with islanders instead relying on horses for their transport. Number 5. The Grand Shrine of Ise, Japan. There are said to be as many as 80,000 Shinto shrines across Japan, with people being just as likely to worship at home as they are in a public building. And while most welcome anyone who wishes to make use of them in their spiritual beliefs, there's one that only a select few people can enter. It's known as the Grand Shrine of Ise. It was built to honor Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun and the universe. Amazingly, the construction of the shrine made use of traditional Japanese woodcrafting techniques, which means not a single nail was used. It was first built more than 2,000 years ago, but in accordance with the Shinto ideals of death and rebirth, it's actually fully rebuilt every 20 years, and the last time this happened was in 2013. Today, in respect of how important the shrine is, the only people allowed to enter are priests and members of the imperial royal family. The closest anyone can get to see the shrine is from the outside through the wooden fences that surround it, but it is permitted to walk around the grounds, which include a forest and a series of ornamental walkways that were built around 150 years ago. Number 4. The Superconducting Super Collider. The largest particle collider in the world right now is hidden beneath the ground near Geneva in Switzerland, but there were once plans to build something on a completely different level. Keeping true to the state's ethos that everything's bigger in Texas, the desert outside the town of Waxahachie was chosen as the location for the superconducting super collider, which if it had been completed, it would have been more than 3 times as big as the one in Europe, with a length of almost 55 miles or 87.1 kilometers. Construction began in 1991, but after spending $2 billion on the project, work was suspended because of the spiraling costs. 14 miles or 22.5 kilometers of tunnels had already been dug by this time, along with several buildings along the route, and while most of the structures were flooded to help retain their stability, the others were locked down and forgotten about. Access to the site is strictly prohibited because of safety concerns and the possibility that there's still some top-secret equipment lying around, which makes it all the more surprising that most people who live nearby have no idea that any of it actually exists. Number 3. Jadr Air Base. When building an airport, or more specifically, an Air Force base, one of the things that designers often do is choose a location as far away from obstacles like mountains as they can. The complete opposite happened with the Jadr Air Base in Albania, however, and that's because they wanted to carve out an operations center within the mountain that would become the country's most secretive facility. After landing, aircraft can turn directly into a tunnel underneath the mountain, and the base is said to contain enough space for up to 50 aircraft to be in there. The idea, of course, was to protect the aircraft, particularly from the Yugoslav Air Force, and the landing strip welcomed its first aircraft in 1973. It began solely under the control of the Albanian forces, but its secretive nature made it ideal for other uses too. In the 1990s, the CIA used the airbase to fly unmanned spy missions over neighboring countries, and in the mid-1990s, the base was used to fly Predator drones over to Bosnia. Because aircraft could deliver components and supplies to the base without prying eyes from satellites being able to see, it's perfect for launching classified operations, but as of the year 2000, it's been regulated to nothing more than an aircraft storage facility. There are rumors, of course, that the base isn't as decommissioned as the authorities would have us think, and there's no way to definitively know how active the command center deep within the mountain truly is. Number 2. HAARP Research Station, Alaska. The HAARP Research Station, which stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, first started being built in Gakona, Alaska in 1993 as a joint project between the United States Air Force, Navy, the local university, and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is more commonly known as DARPA. The official reason for the station was to study the Earth's ionosphere and to try to develop enhancement technologies for communications and surveillance within it. Essentially, the facility is a high-powered high-frequency transmitter that directs a 3.6 megawatt signal into the ionosphere, and this can either be continuous or pulsed. On the face of it, the authorities running the research station have been fully transparent with the work they're trying to do to unlock the secrets of the highest level of our atmosphere, but there are plenty of suggestions that all may not be how it seems, and they certainly don't let anyone just walk around the site to see it for themselves. Having cost more than $250 million to build, with a number of agencies involved in its operation, not only have the emissions from the station affected the ability of local communities to use technology, but they've also interfered with the local ecosystems for an as-yet unexplained reason. There are suggestions that the true nature of the research station is to try to weaponize weather systems, to secretly hijack electronic signals as they pass through the ionosphere, or even to try to develop a form of mind control. Quite whether HAARP is a super-secret weapons facility with a science experiment as a cover story, or is exactly what they claim it is can't be known for certain, but it surely wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility. Number 1. Surtsey Island, Iceland. On the 14th of November, 1963, a huge underwater volcanic eruption began off the southern coast of Iceland, and it would set in motion a series of events that would become known as the most unique scientific experiment ever. By the time the eruption ended in June of 1967, a brand new chain of islands had been formed, the largest of which was called Surtsey, and it gave the incredible insight into the way that islands are created. The other formations soon wore away in the face of oceanic erosion, but Surtsey is still there to this day, and it's only expected to fall back beneath the waves in around a century or so. It has long been a protected site, with only authorized researchers allowed anywhere near it, but this isn't anything to do with safety. Instead, it's to prevent contamination on the island, so researchers can further study the development of new islands. Bacteria, fungi, and molds were, for example, the first living organisms to appear on Surtsey, and these provided the basis for the ecosystem that could support more complex life. Now, it's believed that there are 89 species of birds and 335 invertebrates in the area, and this number is only expected to increase as time passes. And while there's a solitary hut on the island, this is for researchers to conduct observations without contaminating the rest of the island, and any other visits are completely out of the question. There have been 2 instances when this strict biosecurity was breached, once when some kids were believed to have rowed over to the island and planted some potatoes, and another when an unknown culprit relieved themselves in an improperly managed way, and this led to a tomato plant beginning to grow. In both cases, these plants were quickly removed, and the island remains an important way of learning how new species manage to establish themselves in new places. 0. Secrecy leaves no ruins, only boundaries. What's hidden often matters more than what's visible. These places exist quietly, untouched by curiosity. And most will remain unseen long after we're gone.